Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Foundations Live OT Week special. Right, a little bit of a different Foundations Live today. Because while it might be Tuesday afternoon at 2 for you, it's Wednesday morning at 1 a.m. for me, as you can probably tell by the dark sky behind me. I'm in Sydney at the moment, but I couldn't miss the OT Week Foundations Live. So I'm going to do the introductions, and I'm going to mostly hand over to Rachel Russell to run most of this afternoon's Foundations Live. But thank you all for joining us. It's good to be able to do this once a year. So I think this will be one of a continuing run of Foundations Lives for OT Week, but I'm going to hand over to Rachel Russell in a moment. But just a few introductions, as we always do, if I can find the right bits to press at this time in the morning. So we're the National Body for Home Improvement Agencies and the Disabled Facilities Grant. And we're funded by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So we're here to support you with anything DFG related. And if you're looking for closed captions, they're available via social media on LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, if you're watching via the website, you'll find the links to all of those channels, and you can find the closed captions there. And if you need to leave early or want to come back to this at any point, the recording will be kind of on demand on all of those channels, and you'll be able to find sections of it on YouTube afterwards as well if you want to come back and view anything afterwards. But to get us going for the day, I'm going to welcome Rachel Russell, who's our Head of Regional Advice and Resident OT, to give us an intro to the afternoon.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, just a warm welcome and a huge thank you to Paul as well, because bless him, not that we feel sorry for him because he's in Australia, but a huge thank you to Paul for kind of staying awake till 1 to help us host this event. Yeah, really excited about OT Week this year, because for me, and my passion for housing, how we can use the DFG, it is all about that stuff around prevention, which is what ARCOT's OT Week is about this week. And they've got the strapline right support at the right time. As many of you will know, we are working with the Royal College on the next iteration on housing without delay. And one of the things that has been a real privilege over the last 4 months since we've been working on the project is just the number of occupational therapists that we are meeting that are involved in some way around housing and how their roles in housing are really contributing in terms of prevention. So lots of OTs, and I know I've just seen that we've got people like Rachel Wooden on the line. We've got Jill, who will be speaking later, who actually get involved in the design of homes even before they're built. So actually we're designing homes for people that we don't know who they are, but what we know is that we're designing homes that will support people, so perhaps they don't actually ever need to come to social care. So for me, what I want to do this week with OT Week, what I want to do with the session today is kind of celebrate that work that we do as OTs in social care, the what we do as OTs in housing, and how we are really at the cutting edge of in terms of prevention. Because as I say, we're designing homes so that we actually stop people from needing to come to social care for that support. So what we've got today is we've got 3 brilliant speakers. So we're going to hear from Miriam, who's from York University. And Miriam was involved with Bath Out 2, which for the first time we've got absolutely brilliant evidence that kind of demonstrates the value and the cost effectiveness and what we can save if we actually get adaptations in quick. But also Miriam's got some exciting news about a new project that the team are working on at York, which is Equipping. So we'll shortly hand over to Miriam that will take us through that new piece of research. We've then got Jill Pritchard, who is a brilliant housing occupational therapist that works in Scotland, and she's part of the team working on housing without delay. And Jill will be talking about some of the preventative work that is being done around housing in Scotland. And then to finish with, we've got a recording that we did a couple of weeks ago with a brilliant principal occupational therapy in Wiltshire, Mary Harvey. And it's just really nice to see the work that people like Miriam does at York University, alongside the work that we've done previously with the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. Because what Mary has done is she's got some funding to do a pilot project that's bringing together the work with Adaptations Without Delay with that evidence base from Bath Out 2 to do a preventative approach to using DFG, looking at bathroom adaptation. So we've got a presentation, a recorded presentation from Mary at the end. There is a chat box, so if people want to put any questions in that you might have for any of the speakers, then please feel free to add that to the comments box. But I will now hand over to give a warm welcome to Miriam from York University, who's going to take us through the first presentation. So, yeah, welcome, Miriam. Thanks ever so much. I'll hand over to you now, and over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And thank you for inviting me to speak to you all today. So as Rachel said, I have worked now for the last 10 years on what was Bath Out and has now evolved into Equipping. So I'm going to give you a very brief update on Bath Out. I'm aware that Philip and myself and others have spoken to Foundations Live quite a lot about Bath Out over the years. But we'll focus more on Equipping today to look to the future. So just very briefly, I have to mention that as the study is funded by the NIHR, anything that I say today that may be controversial is not necessarily the views of the NIHR or the Department of Health and Social Care. So Bath Out, those of you that know about Bath Out will know that it was the first national randomised control trial into housing adaptations in the UK. That study has now completed, and we're delighted to find that the evidence is there for us to be able to use now. The primary kind of outcomes, headline outcomes from the study are that putting in bathing adaptation quicker has improvements on physical and mental outcome scores, which I'm sure is a shock to nobody on this call, but actually having that as an evidence base that we can refer to is really important. So we had secondary outcomes as well in terms of falls, fear of falling, social care related quality of life, independence with daily tasks, and ease of bathing. And the intervention was found to be beneficial in all of those aspects. And of particular interest was around the health economics. So by putting in a bathing adaptation earlier and not having people sitting on a waiting list, it was found that actually we were able to show cost effectiveness, reducing the need for other bathing resources, health and social care interventions, and so overall it costs less for everybody involved. And it was that particular figure, because of course everybody likes to talk money, that was of most interest to people when we went down to the House of Lords and were able to present earlier in the year. And you can see there's a picture there of a few of us, including Rachel, that were there from the team. We are still working on the publications for Bath Out too, so please watch this space, and we'll certainly be circulating them through Foundations when they're ready for people to use. So what's next? I thought this was quite interesting because it shows not only how research has progressed in the social care space, but also how graphics have come along in the last 10 years. So those of you that will know Bath Out 2, you'll recognise the image on the left. And now to familiarise yourself with our new logo, which is the study called Equip In. So Equip In is essentially a follow-on study from Bath Out 2, but we're looking to analyse the full pathway of bathing interventions within social care delivery. So our short title is Enhancing Quality of Life Through Innovative Pathways for Independent Bathing. And so over the years, the programme is for 5 years. You'll see these logos and this title hopefully popping up in different areas. So please look out for them. We wanted to take a step back from finishing Bath Out 2. Bath Out 2 is very much at the end of the pathway, which I'm hoping a lot of you on the call will find familiar. But we realised, especially from doing the kind of qualitative assessments where we were speaking to people, that the beginning of the pathway, when those assessments were initially made, going through MIDA adaptations and provision actually was really important for us to investigate. So Equip In is essentially looking at that full pathway from referral, where a need is being identified by an older person or carer, when that's triaged and how it's triaged, depending on the different teams and where that person is based. If a minor adaptation is deemed appropriate, so thinking about bathing seats, handles, things that people could perhaps put into their homes without too much disruption. Then on to more of a formalised assessment, perhaps by a member of the OT team, and thinking about provision of different types of equipment from either a community store or a private contractor. Then on to referrals to housing, maybe where needs can't be met with equipment or minor adaptations, and then it might be that actually a major adaptation is then deemed appropriate. We've got the DFG assessment and further referrals as appropriately for the DFG, or potentially self-funding for those that DFG is not suitable for. And then hopefully, finally, the provision of the adaptation and the review process. So we're hoping that this timeline that we've built is fairly familiar to those of you that are on the call. If it isn't, please do let us know feedback if there's something that you feel we've missed or that we need to adjust and change. But it's this full pathway that we're looking to try and evaluate within the Equip In programme grant. So this is an image which I'm hoping will detail the programme of work that we're intending to complete over the next 5 years. We essentially have 5 work packages. So a work package is a kind of study within a study. So we've got 5 studies within the whole programme of work. Initially, we're going to be starting with work package 1, and that's my work package, and that is wanting to try and capture the lived and practice experiences. So some of you may have been approached by my colleague Gemma to consider joining our practice experience insight panel. That panel's now formed and has already started working towards our study documentation. And you'll see with the yellow that's threaded through all of the rest of the work packages that we were wanting to use our experiences from our public and practitioner members throughout every stage of the study. So they will feed into and review and work in co-production for each one of the different work packages. Secondly, we're going to have some mapping surveys and in-depth interviews, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a second. The main kind of work package is going to be a prospective cohort study. So we'll be looking at following people's journey as they go through that pathway and reviewing how they are progressing and their outcomes as a result of that. Work package 4 is our health economics kind of work package. So please forgive me. I am not a health economist, but I'll do my best to explain that to you all later. So that's a budget impact analysis and multi-criteria decision analysis. And then finally, our work package 5 is looking at recommendations and resources to support implementation. It's all very well and good to do this kind of work, but it's really important that we're looking at how we can then implement that into practice in the future. So, work package 1. Public and practitioner involvement. So as I've just mentioned, we're going to be looking to work with people with lived experience, both as practitioners and also members of the public or carers. And we have formed 2 diverse panels, and we're currently meeting once a month. They sit independent to each other. They sit as sister panels, and at certain stages throughout the next 5 years, we'll bring those panels together to work in collaboration to work on specific things. Myself, I'm leading on that work package alongside Gemma Bradley at Northumbria, and we have a member of the public co-applicant, Claire, who is somebody who has lived experience of receiving bathing adaptations in her home as a disabled adult. As I've said before, we're going to have that continuous information flow in and out of all of the different work packages. It's quite a novel way. Those of you that are familiar with research will be familiar with the terms like PPI. And generally, PPI will sit kind of separate to the main parts of research and can sometimes be a little bit tokenistic. And we felt that it was really important that actually we highlighted the value of having public and practitioner input. So that's why we're leading with that from day dot, and then we're wanting to try and incorporate the co-design within each of the work packages as we continue through the stages. Work package 2, which we're currently working on the ethics submission for, is essentially a mapping exercise. So we're looking to try and map the current pathways to assessment and provision of assistive technologies in adult social care. We're going to do this in a couple of different ways. Initially, we're going to have a survey. So those of you that are working within local authorities will hopefully see this pop into your inbox in the next couple of months. And we're wanting to try and get details from up to 30 different local authority sites to get a handle on how the different local authorities are doing things. That could be, you know, in terms of where you are in geography, rural and more urban settings, and looking for smaller and much larger local authorities. We are then going to hold workshops, so those of you that are able to respond to the survey will be invited to come along to the different workshops, and those will happen alongside the public and practitioner insight panels. We're then going to develop a map. At this point, I'm not sure what that map's going to look like, but we're hoping to be able to identify methods of good practice that we would like to use as an example, which then we could offer as a way for other local authorities to adapt their services and learn from each other in that way. And similarly, we're going to have some interviews with members of the public who have accessed these different local authority services, as well as self-funders. So work package 3 is our main study that we're going to be completing within the Equipping programme. That's being led by Philip, Andrew Kingston and Joanne Gray. And we're wanting to kind of evaluate that effectiveness and cost effectiveness. This is very much a follow-on from Bath Out and is really important when we're looking to try and get that evidence base to show that what we are doing and you are doing out there on the coalface at different local authorities is actually helping and benefiting people. So we're going to do what's called a prospective cohort study, where we're going to compare different waiting times and look to evaluate the different effectiveness measures of when people are provided with equipment or minor adaptations. And importantly, from our evidence from Bath Out 2, the impact of waiting times and actually how much that does impact on people's overall quality of life. So for that study, we're going to be working with 8 local authority sites. So again, those of you that work at a local authority, look out for that work that's going to be doing. Inclusion will be for older adults, which is classed as 55 and over. I was shocked to learn. Closely approaching older adult life, I am. And we're going to be using standardised outcome measures. So those of you that have followed our Bath Out work will be familiar with these different types of measures. I won't go into what they mean today, but it is possible to look them up online. And then we're going to be doing a statistical analysis plan and a health ec plan as well, to make sure we're getting that evidence base that we need. Alongside that, we will be doing a systematic review. Research can't happen without a systematic review. I won't go into the details of that, but that's something that we will be producing. And Mark Simmons is leading on that work package. So the health economics is really, really important for us. That was something that came out of Bath Out, that actually money talks. And so it was important that we were able to try and really dig down into what is cost effective and what isn't. So off the back of the cohort study, we're going to be delivering a budget impact analysis and a multi-criteria decision analysis. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, this isn't my field of expertise, but if you keep an eye on the outputs from the study, we will have much cleverer people than me kind of break down the important factors for us to digest in a little bit of an easier fashion. And then leading on to work package 5, we're wanting to really identify how we can implement the best practice findings that we are going to be, she says, finding from the studies that we're going to be delivering through this programme of work. And so Tim is going to be leading on that. Tim worked with us on Bath Out too. And so we're going to be drawing on lots of different ways to analyse this in terms of interviews. We're going to be observing commissioners and providers of adult social care services. And again, those co-design workshops with our public and practice members, with the intention that we're wanting to develop a range of recommendations and resources to support that streamlining of pathways for different local authorities as an output of this programme of work. So the key outputs to be kind of thinking about with the 5 work packages is that we're wanting to develop the kind of a suite of inclusive study processes and materials, and that will be with both our public and practitioner panels, so that we're able to use those in future research and recommend them to other social care researchers. Certainly within Bath Out, we are in the vanguard of kind of evaluative social care research, and so we want to try and evidence our best practice when we're relating to public and practitioner members. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be developing this map of common and innovative pathways, and that will be hosted online. So that will be something that people who are interested, who work in the area, will be able to access and to use within their local systems. We're wanting to establish effectiveness and cost effectiveness findings, and the health economic outputs will be different models that will then be able to be used in future research. And then finally, at the back of work package 5, looking to determine effective strategies for implementation and improving development and evaluation of different interventions in the future. We do also have a PhD studentship, so any of you that are on the call that may be interested in doing a PhD, please let us know. We are looking for somebody with practice experience to take on this task. So something that really came out off the back of Bath Out 2 was the impact of assistive technologies for bathing for carers of older adults, and how that can have a huge impact on their quality of life. So we're going to have a PhD studentship that's due to begin in September 2026 that will run alongside the majority of the rest of the programme. And the focus of that studentship will be on the impact of assistive technologies for carers in their role in supporting older adults. So that's me for today. If any of you have any questions or queries, any feedback on that initial image that I showed you, then please do reach out to us. I've put up the Equipping email address, and I'm sure that can be shared with you otherwise. And thank you for listening.
That's great, Miriam. I think there are a couple of questions, so I'm hoping that Paul's going to work his magic from Australia and put them across. Somebody certainly, how will people be able to find out more about the PhD studentship?
Yeah, so we're going to have an Equipping website that's currently being developed now. We only started Equipping in September, so we are still just sort of getting up to speed. So details of the PhD studentship will be added to the website. We can also share it with foundations if that would be something that you were able to distribute in your mailing lists. So absolutely, yeah, we'd be very interested to hear from anybody that's interested.
Yeah, just to let people know, I'm actually part of the research team as I was with Bath Out 2, so I'll be keeping people up to date. But yeah, Miriam, that's something that's not a problem. We can get that out into the newsletter. Somebody has asked, so I think it's I can't see. Lance has asked a question about how are you defining assistive technology? It's always a big one, isn't it? How you define assistive technology?
Yeah.
So, but how are you defining assistive technology for bathing?
Yeah, and that's part of what we're going to be doing in that work package too, where we're looking to get practice examples, because we're aware that actually different local authorities may well define it differently. From our perspective, it's any type of external device that somebody might use to assist them with bathing. That could be a bath board, that could be a seat that they use to sit at the sink and strip wash. But yeah, that's definitely one of the questions that we're wanting to try and establish within that work package too.
Brilliant. I think that's it for questions. I know a couple of people have asked about the Bath Out 2 calculator that we've worked with the research team to develop, and I'm sure we can pop a link to that hopefully today. Miriam, just a huge thank you. For me, it's such an important piece of work is this. I was down in Devon yesterday in Exeter with about 60 social care and housing OTs down there, talking around kind of proactive and reactive prevention. And sometimes it is that bit around, we just need a better evidence base to kind of work out when is it do we put in major adaptations, and when do we perhaps withhold it. So I think this is an important piece of work, one to kind of justify how useful bathing equipment is, and those bits. So it's an important piece of work. So huge thank you, Miriam. Right, as Miriam exits the stage, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Jill Pritchard, who is one of our project partners that we're working with Housing Without Delay. And Jill has kindly come to speak to us about some of the preventative work that she does as a housing OT in Scotland. So I'm just adding you to the stage. Welcome, Jill. It's really good to have you involved in Housing Without Delay. We're learning lots, aren't we, in terms of how as occupational therapists in housing we really do prevention, but prevention well before we actually see a person. And I know I've mentioned we've got people like Rachel and Jaquel on the call. We've got people like yourselves who are designing new builds even before people. And I think sometimes we we don't shout about that enough, do we? I think as OTs, I think we need to do more of that, and hopefully that's what we're going to be able to do with housing without delays, amplify that voice that we have and the role that we can play as occupational therapists in terms of design. So I'll leave the stage and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak. And hello, everybody. Even though I can't see you, I know you're there, and I recognise a couple of names. So yeah, it's great to be here. So yeah, I'm Jo Pritchard. I'm a self-employed OT for about the last 11 years or so, mainly working around housing. And when people ask me what I do these days, I tend to say I'm kind of a thorn in Scottish Government side, basically, always trying to kind of promote improvements in the delivery of adaptations and accessible housing more and inclusive housing more generally in Scotland. So yeah, very good to be here. So I'm just going to say a wee bit about, I've unashamedly stolen Rachel's proactive prevention rather than just prevention phrase, and I absolutely love that. So we're going to say a wee bit about prevention, early intervention generally, a bit about the kind of some of the stuff that's going on in Scotland, and I've got some case examples to share. And I do apologise because there's meant to be a picture on the right hand side of this slide, or the left hand side, or yours, and it was a picture of a lighthouse on a cliff, which I thought was quite apt for talking about prevention. So sorry about that. I'll move on to my next slide, which also has a lovely picture, which some of you have seen before if you've been at housing specialist section conferences. This is actually on the island of Harris, and I would very much recommend you get there if you haven't already been there. So in terms of proactive prevention and early intervention in adaptations, and I've put a wee quote from Desmond Tutu up at the top there about needing to go upstream and find out why people are falling into rivers, not just pulling them out once they're in. But I think we know why they're falling in. We can't always predict when, but we know what we need to do, just as Rachel was saying there, in terms of wider housing solutions. Occupational therapists absolutely are at the heart of getting further up that pathway and preventing things from happening before they do. So I've just divided this into kind of all occupational therapists' role, and then kind of more specifically around maybe some of the roles where people are more embedded in housing and social care. But in terms of all occupational therapists, I suppose kind of echoing what Rachel said as well there at the beginning, we're talking to so many OTs around the 4 countries where housing really is at the heart, and the environment, a person's home environment, is absolutely at the heart of what we do, because it doesn't matter what setting we work with a person in. The vast majority of the people we're working with live in a home of some type, and we need to absolutely take on board how they're functioning at home and how their environment impacts on them. So it's all of our business, I think, to do that. There's a huge element of this which is around the implementation of adaptations without delay, which I'm sure most of you will be absolutely familiar with. And I cannot recommend that document more highly, not just because of what it is enabling people to do, much of which I'm sure you're already doing, but it really kind of promotes that kind of work around who else can be picking up some of the other straightforward adaptations and thereby allowing and enabling occupational therapists to really deal with the more complex cases. But also for me, I've always promoted it as being a vehicle for getting partners around the table in your local area across all the different organisations that you work with and all the partners you work with to actually implement adaptations without delay at a local level for yourselves. I think the whole aspect of reducing stigma is kind of big, actually. The older I get, the more I understand this. None of us really want to kind of plan ahead in terms of thinking we might get older and we might not be so able to do things. And so that whole stigma around the provision of equipment and adaptations and technology, I mean, it is very much improving, but I think we really need to work hard to continue that journey. And so I think that's important. I'll come back to that. Facilitating others to commission straightforward adaptations. Well, I've already mentioned that in relation to adaptations without delay. And again, that's so much about a partnership approach and agreeing how you implement that locally. I think the whole kind of facilitating self-assessment and self-selection, and again, lots of you will already be doing this around a range of equipment, technology, and adaptations. But the more we can empower people to kind of solve their challenges themselves, then that works better for everybody. It makes people feel better about themselves as well. And I think there's a lot more to be done in terms of working together across social care, health and housing, and indeed wider third sector partners to kind of integrate adaptations into pre-admission and discharge planning. And actually I added, after I'd already put these slides up on StreamYard, but I added in some of the specialist services as well. And I'm thinking there about things like early diagnosis of people who may be living with dementia, or people who are diagnosed as having deteriorating neurological conditions. It's really important to start these conversations about where they live and how suitable that is as soon as is appropriate for that person. Because obviously as OTs, I know you're not all OTs, but I'm sure most of us in this call are very much aware that that's one of the things that's really hard, I think, sometimes to explain to other people about the work that we do, is it's very much person-centered in that regard. I mean, you can only start talking about different things at different times, depending on how ready the person is to engage with that. And then more specifically, where I've said where organisation structures and relationships support this, but I suppose I'm really pointing there to where occupational therapy roles are much more embedded around social care and housing and other community settings. Then for us to be getting involved in the design of new housing developments, that's absolutely critical. And the more work we can do around that, the better. Or I fear that many of you on the call and lots of younger occupational therapists coming through will still be dealing with, if we keep building these kind of boxes that tend to be what people apparently want to be building in terms of making the cost stack up, then we'll still be picking up the costs for adaptations that probably will get more and more complex as well, and more expensive as time goes on. So the more we can integrate a much higher level of inclusive design into new housing. And indeed, that second point there, which is about integrating inclusive design into all aspects of asset management in terms of bathroom, kitchen, electrical, lighting replacement programs, just the addition of extra task lighting, as many of us know, can make a huge impact. The whole cyclical maintenance approach, estate management, when your estate management guys in housing, either in local authorities or your housing associations, are out and about doing estate management, just making sure paths are safe and there's rails where there are steps. All these kind of things can really help. And then regeneration schemes has been a great thing for OTs to get involved in particular areas. I've got particular colleagues in Glasgow and parts of Edinburgh where they've been demolishing houses and then rebuilding, and absolutely critical to get OTs involved in ensuring that the design of those new properties are fit for purpose. And then in terms of some of the things that are going on with evidence in Scotland at the moment, I've only pulled out a few things, and that, if any of you are hill walkers, that is Anchallach, one of the finest mountains in Scotland. I'm not trying to sell Scotland as a place to live and work, well, I am really, but there's lots of lovely places in the other three countries too. So one of the big projects, and I was really minded a lot of the things that Miriam was talking about in terms of work packages and 5-year research projects, programs were familiar to me because I'm involved in the ISPA project, which is the intersectional stigma, of place-based age, disability and place. And it's led by Professor Vicky McCall, who some of you have maybe heard talking at various conferences and maybe know about. She's a huge advocate for occupational therapists. And that's a 5-year project. We're a bit through year 3, due to finish in September 27. And that's funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. And that's if you haven't had a look at some of the things that are going on there, there's lots of different work packages, a lot of emphasis on working with people with lived experience and involving them in the research, and using peer researchers to carry out a lot of the work over the piece. And yeah, lots of information on Housing Learning Improvement Network. It's a collaboration across a number of universities across the 4 countries, so it's not just taking place in Scotland. I know that Vicky's done a lot of work down in London as well as part of ISPA. But the What Next for Adaptations, I've put a link in there to the summary for that research, which we just published earlier this year. I was involved in supporting that and a lot of the stakeholder work, and that was really for us in Scotland. We're still fighting the good fight about trying to get adaptations much higher up the Scottish Government agenda. And what we were trying to do there was, it's almost like a State of the Nation report, where we have kind of reviewed where we're at with what's going on in adaptations at the moment, in terms of working with stakeholders, but also I reviewed something like 28 documents from the last 30 years, strategies and policy and research papers, all consistently making the same recommendations for improvements, and we just have not seen the systemic approach to improvements. There's lots of good examples. Again, I'm sure you'll be aware, there's lots of examples of good practice across the countries. We're not very good at sharing them often, but we just haven't in Scotland have had that kind of systemic approach to improvements. So we're very much hoping that that's going to feed into the government's apparently impending review of adaptations, and looking for some real change there. We also recently, a few years ago, published Making Adaptations Work for Older People, and that was very much about lived experience again, and it was Age Scotland who funded that, and Stirling University did most of the work. Again, I've put the link in for that. There's some really useful information in there about, really from an older person's perspective, what would make things better. One of the things I really loved about that with the stakeholder work was a lady who lived in Inverness who couldn't understand why she couldn't just order lots of things on Amazon. Why couldn't we just have equipment on Amazon that she could access? Which, yeah, well, whatever you think about Amazon, it does make some sense. And then I've put a couple of social return on investment reports. Now, they're a wee bit old now, but nevertheless, the information in them is still completely valid. I didn't manage to upload the links to them, but I can get them to Foundation so they can add that. Some really good kind of benefits, real hard benefits information in terms of money, because I think it was Miriam that said it's often money that money makes the world go round. And just a wee quick thing before I move on, when I was going over this just before we started, we have, you may or may not know, we have an election next year in Scotland, and lots of people are producing their manifestos at the moment, and a couple of really heartening things for me. I mean, there's a real kind of movement around the whole adaptations and accessible housing agenda in Scotland at the moment, and the Chartered Institute of Housing published their manifesto last week, I think, and it's the first time I have seen explicitly, I think within 3 of their main themes, I think there's only 3, one of them is meeting changing needs, and that is all about the stuff that we are concerned with in terms of adaptations and inclusive and accessible design. So that's great. And Hanover Housing just published theirs today. It's in our Scottish Housing News. You can probably pick it up if you Google it. They're really kind of, it's a call to action for Scottish Government to future-proof our society, basically for an ageing population. And they're talking about savings of 500 million a year by taking a much more kind of future-proofing approach to housing and care and adaptation. So that's probably worth a look. And just again, I've just pulled out a few case examples of some of the stuff that we're doing in Scotland. And again, you will be doing a lot of these things too. quite a lot of local authorities and health and social care partnerships around Scotland have self-assessment online tools. Fife have, it used to be called Smart Life in Fife because it was Smart Care, but they've changed it recently to Living Safely and Independently at Home in Fife. So people can go on, as I'm sure you know, and go through some questions and sometimes kind of find their solutions themselves or be referred on if they need some support or if indeed they need an actual referral for an occupational therapy assessment. And in Glasgow and the broader Equip You partners, they use Ask Sarah. And just another quick wee thing about Fife. I am sitting here in Fife and I did used to work there, but other local authorities are available. They also recently have, in partnership with their housing colleagues, have opened a shop front in Kirkcaldy which has housing advice, but they've also put in a demonstration a bathroom with a wet floor shower and some equipment and a stair lift on some stairs for people to go in and try, and it's right on the high street. And again, I'm sure lots of you will have had experience of different approaches to that, but yeah, it's probably something we used to have in the old days, but that's great that we've got it back again. Designing out adaptations in the Link Group. So the Link Group is one of the biggest kind of group structure housing associations in Scotland, and has a development wing, etc. And they have an inclusive design team, and the manager is an occupational therapist, a colleague of mine, Angela Gardner, and she has really raised the level of inclusive design in their new build properties and has inputted into the asset management approach for all existing properties. And she has this phrase of designing out adaptations, which I love, which is about just the more kind of inclusive design features we can incorporate in new houses, then the fewer additional adaptations we will have to put in. And also for me as well, it's about not kind of othering other people, you know, othering some people that need very special things. Why can't we just all have a much higher level of inclusive design? So we need fewer specialist designs of housing. We've got, so I'm chair of Horizon Housing Association, as well as being an OT, and we're taking part in the ISPA project with a pilot using Invisible Creations, some of their wee bits of equipment. And again, it's about that kind of reducing stigma and making things more acceptable for people, so they're more likely to self-select them and do them earlier and put them in themselves. We've also got, and again, you'll have this, a lot of areas that have self-selection for external handrails, so they don't need to have an assessment. If they fill in a form and they fulfill certain criteria, then they just get the handrails. It's probably much cheaper than waiting and having any kind of assessment for that in terms of staff time, etc. We've got a couple of local authorities and housing associations trying bathroom upgrades where they integrate wet floor shower drainage underneath the bath. So when they're doing the bathroom upgrades in existing houses, they put the wet floor drainage in and then put the bath on top, so that it's much easier to take that out again if people need it later. And then we've got on the iHub, and I've put a link in there, the early housing conversation work, which came out of our Adapting for Change programme a few years ago that was funded by Scottish Government through the Joint Improvement Team. And that early housing conversation work has been rolled out across quite a number of different areas in Scotland. And that's really just about encouraging all partners to take opportunities to have early housing conversations, whether it's the podiatrist that's in regularly seeing a client to deal with their feet, but goes to their home and therefore knows their home situation, and taking any opportunity to instigate that conversation early, just thinking about, you know, how are things with your house? What are you finding difficult? What's important? That kind of thing. But lots of other partners doing that, and that's seen some real benefits across the country. I'm sure there was more I was going to say, but I just wanted to quickly touch on, as Rachel said, we're currently working on the Housing Without Delay document toolkit, which this model will be familiar to you in terms of the triangle of the sort of universal needs at the bottom, the targeted needs, and then the specialist needs at the top. And this is something we're actively working on for the document at the moment in relation to housing without delay. But actually, I always find it's very difficult to talk about housing and inclusive design and accessible housing without then also talking about adaptations and the whole systems approach to that. So this is just trying to encapsulate some of the ways that different OTs in different situations have the kind of responsibilities they have and the kind of opportunities they have to impact on a person's housing outcome. And the bit on in the black writing on the right hand side is just that whole approach of really we've all got a role to play in having those conversations about how people are managing at home and what kinds of things might be helpful and what kind of things could they start thinking about at an earlier stage. Excuse me. And so just thinking about, just to finish, and I apologise, some people will have seen this slide before. We put it together at Horizon many years ago with the ladies' permission. There's something about just making adaptations a bit more desirable, and some of us have talked a lot about, should we call them something else, and should we be like Australia and New Zealand and talk about home modifications? Should we talk about home improvements? Would that make them more kind of desirable or mainstream? But yeah, George Clooney did a lot for homelessness. It'd be nice to have somebody doing something similar for adaptations. And then I don't know, some of you will have seen the article about Zandra Rhodes on her Stana stairlift that she helped to kind of design in terms of the colours, etc. And our own Kate Sheehan, who I'm sure many of you know, supported her in that. So that should help. And then lastly, and again, apologies, you've probably seen this before, but I do like this slide. It's about the only joke we have, only laugh we get as OTs. And I know in Britain, we don't really talk about bars in the shower, we talk about grab rails in the shower, but forgive me, if I was to have something that reduced stigma, that meant I would have it in my bathroom, I would love a bar like this. So thank you very much for listening. That was a bit of a whistle stop.
Foundations Live.
Oh. I'm not very slick at this. Sorry, Jill. But Paul's doing it from, as I say, the other. That was absolutely brilliant. A really good kind of overview of the kind of work that you're doing, the influence that you're having in Scotland. I know you mentioned housing without delay and that conversation that we have. What is a housing OT? Mm-hmm. And I don't think there is one housing OT. I think it's about recognising that there are lots of roles that we can have with working alongside housing that supports people getting better housing at the end of the day. So kind of, working with planning, we've seen those roles there, the roles that we've got around asset management, redevelopment schemes, matching people to properties. And I think what's been nice about housing without delays is a bit like adaptations without delay. We're trying to use what OTs are already doing to show the impact that we can have as OTs that have got an interest in housing. Thank you for highlighting that. Yeah. Paul, have we got any questions? Just having a look. Oh, yeah. I think so. This is from Julia, just around that. In terms of planning, they don't get us involved early enough, but certainly with housing without delay, we've got some examples. Jaquel and Rachel at Wandsworth and Richmond that are already kind of working with planning departments. And again, we've got that evidence now, not that we didn't have it before, but being able to show and use those case studies. So we're, as part of the operational toolkits, we're going to have case studies that give the exemplars of that work that is already being done, and the kind of impact that those roles have in terms of return on investment, cost savings, and those bits and pieces. This one, I found OTs also looking at housing assessments, allocations.
I'm just looking at that one, Julie. Sorry, Rachel. Just the one about the large families, and that's a huge challenge right across all the countries. Lots of OTs are struggling with that one. I talked to the OTs in Edinburgh though, and they've got an empty homes initiative, and they've been looking at things like they've been working with their housing colleagues, things like old janitors' houses, and houses that have come back into the local authority, and seeing what they can do there in terms of larger families. So that will be one of the things hopefully we can highlight, Rachel, in the Housing Without Delay.
Yes,
looking for these opportunities, isn't it?
Yeah, and like I said, that's what we try to do with Housing Without Delays, using what's already going out there, because there is so much good practice across all 4 nations, and really kind of shouting at that. So the problem is the budgets and where they sit as well. And again, I think it's about us having those strategic conversations, and from a leadership point of view, pointing out, because we are often as occupational therapists at that interface, aren't we, where you get caught up with a case and you're trying to, it's a social care need, but you're trying to use housing funding to meet that need. And I think it's about that leadership that we should have as occupational therapists to try to influence that. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm sure we've come across some examples of where that's happening at the moment. I think the more evidence we can get about those benefits to health and social care colleagues, in terms of money, because that's what it absolutely comes down to. And we're in Scotland, you're probably aware, we've got our we had our integration of health and social care in 2014, and some of the partnerships have got that if they spend money on, I always use the example of, if you spend money on external handrails on steps, you'll save money on people falling and fracturing a hip, and then you've got a hospital admission and all of that. It's about these kind of examples, and really promoting that. And also it's about people's stories, I think, and getting people around the partners around the table with an illustration of a person's story. I think even with the politicians in Scotland, when they hear about the impact on an individual person or people, then it means something more on a human level. Do you know?
I think it's those positive stories as well, isn't it? Because yes, we've got lots of stories where things don't work really well, but actually what we need is much more about those positive stories. And again, I know I keep on harping on about it, but the positive stories that we're hearing through the work that we're doing at Housing Without Delay. And again, I know Helen Jones has just mentioned in her area that Housing have got a budget to buy houses on the open market to deal with those complex cases. So there is some really good stuff that is, happening out there, but it's how we as a community of occupational therapists kind of share those stories so that everybody benefits from that and we can use those cases. A huge thank you, Jill. As always, brilliant presentation. Right, as I figure out how to do what I'm doing. So the final presentation this afternoon, and I've just gone to, hopefully Paul can tee it up for me. Sorry, I'm working on one screen this afternoon and my screen isn't helping. I don't know whether, thank you, Paul. Right, huge welcome, Mary. Thank you ever so much for meeting me this morning. Unfortunately, you're not going to be around for the special webinar that we're running on the Tuesday for OT Week, which is all around prevention. The reason I was keen to get you along, Mary, is I know we've been chatting, and I know you've got a really exciting project that you're going to be doing in Wiltshire around prevention that is being inspired by Bath Out 2. So also at the webinar during OT Week, we're going to have the team that did Bath Out 2. And I know you've obviously been inspired by the work that the Royal College of OT did around adaptations without delay. So it seemed really fitting to get you along to talk about the project that you're doing in Wiltshire that is around prevention. So what I will do is I will leave the stage and I'll hand over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. It's really lovely to be with you here in OT Week. Happy OT Week to you all, and I hope you've got fabulous things planned. So as Rachel said, my name is Mary Harvey, and I'm the Principal Occupational Therapist in Wiltshire Council. And I want to share with you some of the work that we're doing that's really in its early stages regarding adaptations without delay, and a preventative pilot that we've got planned to implement some of the work that we've seen nationally and locally that's influenced it. So hopefully I can move my slide on. Yes, I can. Hooray! I wanted to share with you what our current bathing process looks like in Wiltshire, and somebody would potentially come and call our advice and contact. That's the ANC thing at the top, to tell us that they've got a bathing issue, and they'd might be seen straight away, they might not be, they might be on a waiting list, and they'd be assessed by the occupational therapist, and they'd go around this circle to be offered a type of bathing equipment to meet their need where they were at. It would be reviewed and the case would be closed. And we found that was what was happening for people several times in a row. Potentially they were coming to see us, getting in touch, or somebody was referring on, say that they've got an issue to do with their bathing needs, and we'd go and see them several times over several years. And eventually, at some point, after going around this circle a few times, or maybe we'd resolve it straight away, but sometimes as their needs progress, we'd find that they need more complex equipment. So we go back and see them another time to offer them the next stage of bathing equipment. So they might have progressed from a bath board and a bath step to a swivel bather the next time we see them, and then perhaps they go around this circle another time, and we'd be thinking about an overbath shower. So we find that we're doing things in very incremental ways, and eventually at some point we'd assess them when we go back maybe the third time and find that equipment wasn't meeting the need, and we'd look at doing a disabled facilities grant referral, and then potentially permanently resolve the issue after that, so that the person's bathing needs were no longer they weren't coming back to us a few years later. And so we found that when we stopped and did this process review, which is where this all came from, we thought, this is crazy. People are going round and round and round in circles over several years, getting different levels of equipment. We're not meeting their needs straight away for the long term. We're looking quite short term, and this doesn't make any sense. We're getting lots of referrals coming in. Our waiting lists are being affected. How can we do things differently? And obviously, this is in the landscape of some other work that's been going on through research, but the challenges we found were that we're in quite short term in our approach to equipment for bathing needs, and our resources were really stretched, and we had long waiting lists, and we're potentially being inefficient by just meeting people's needs where they were at. Obviously, this has an environmental impact for people from us going out repeatedly. Our equipment service or our occupational therapy staff had a carbon footprint going and doing those visits. And actually, when we asked the people that we work with, they were quite frustrated that we weren't resolving their issue in a longer term way. And whilst initially we found that good practice in the past looked like meeting people's needs where they were at, the landscape across the UK was changing, and that the best practice was looking more towards long-term needs with bathing rather than meeting people at the initial point of presentation. And when we had some conversations with the occupational therapists at our front door service, advice and contact, they were saying that some days they would get 4 referrals for people coming back for the same thing to do with bathing. So they'd been referred, and then they'd come back at the next year because the solution was no longer meeting the needs. So we had a really strong rationale for change. I know that you're going to have Bath Out presenters on the call today, so big shout out to you guys. Thank you for doing that research. And Bath Out 2 showed us really clear benefits of fast-tracked adaptations, and them having improved physical and mental health benefits for people using services, and those mental health needs being sustained. Potential to reduce care needs for people, potential to improve carer well-being because people weren't needing to have so much input to support people to bathe if they're having a bathing adaptation, and that bathing adaptations were really cost effective. Pound for pound, adaptations were cheaper than sustained packages of care. Sorry, couldn't get those words out. So that was one of our rationales for change. Another thing that came along was, I'm sure you'll all have seen Royal College of OT's Adaptations Without Delays, which really supports early intervention and getting the right person at the right time to get involved. And so we were looking at how we, as a service, could take on board those recommendations. And then we also had some local data that supported a rationale for change. We had a freedom of information request that came in that was really useful to us as a service to show that adaptations might be a more cost-effective solution for people. So potentially we looked at, so this freedom of information request looked at 2,038 people who'd had an adaptation through a disabled facilities grant over the past 5 years, and it looked at the outcomes for them and what had happened. And this information showed us that of those 2,038 people, they were admitted on average to a care home 2.4 years later than the people who didn't have a disabled facilities grant. And when we drilled into that data and removed the average cost of care, for example, oh, my slides have disappeared. We found that there was a significant potential cost saving by providing adaptations. So those people who by delaying admission to a care home, it could potentially save around £42,000. That we need to do some more digging into that data, but initially that's really impressive that potentially in Wiltshire we could be saving money whilst helping people look at their long-term bathing needs and prevent them having that repeated cycle of going through our system to get those things needed, the equipment, and then look at potentially going to an adaptation sooner. So yeah, that was what we found. So this is our proposed pilot, which we're still in the process of developing. Rachel did ask me. I did say to Rachel, we're not there yet. We're still working on it. But looking at how things will work, we're going to invite people to come in with their bathing needs, get in touch with us. We'll look to temporarily address the need by providing a greater level of equipment from our front door, and using video tools to help people potentially use that and risk assess that and be a bit more proactive in the equipment that we offer and the way that we inform people. And so whilst they're waiting, and hopefully they'll get fast tracked straight in via their OT assessment to an adaptation for their bathing needs, we'll review it, and hopefully in the long term it'll be one and done for the people that are eligible rather than going around the loop multiple times. So that's where we're aiming. Where we're going at this is we're going to be piloting 12 cases in one of our locality areas, and comparing them with 12 other people from another area to assess the impact and evaluate whether we want to do this long term. We'd love to roll this out everywhere immediately, but because of the way that this will systemically affect adult social care in our service, we can't do that without looking at what else is going on, what the other impact is from this, and whether there are any unintentional issues that come up from it. So yeah, that's really where we're going. That's our pilot. We're starting at late autumn, and we're going to be following people through the process, which obviously will take months because adaptations take a while, and we'll be comparing those two different groups of people to see how we get on in reality, and hopefully it will show that things have improved. We'll see. So I'm going to invite Rachel back in. That's what I had to say, Rachel. I felt like I mumbled quite a lot there, so I hope it made sense. Did it make sense?
Do you know what? It's so lovely because having been a principal OT, there's nothing worse when you get that email to say we've had an FOI coming. Can you get such and such data? But it's so positive to see how powerful that you responding to that FOI and actually what you found in terms of some of the benefits that you've already gained in Wiltshire in terms of the DFG. So that it's just really kind of really powerful to see the difference that DFG has made in terms of prevention and preventing people going into kind of residential care. I think the other thing, because one of the things that we're looking at Foundation shortly is around that sustainability. And one of the tasks that I've been given is looking at the kind of environmental impact. And I think sometimes we forget that incremental approach is useful, has is a valid approach, but I think sometimes we don't think about actually the impact of the kind of the equipment that gets used probably does end up, some of it will end up in landfill. So again, we don't think about that wider environmental impact, I don't think always in terms of that incremental approach.
And we had a case study. So when we were building the case for change, we went and found some real live examples. And we had a person who'd come into our service a year ago, had a very minor issue sorted in their bathroom and some ramping done at the front door. So they were going through the DFG process, but then that work was closed down, and 3 months later they came back in for because that bathing equipment hadn't resolved their need, and so they're going back through the DFG loop again for an adaptation in their bathroom now. But that could have all been done in one go for that person. So you've got that environmental impact, but you've also got that upheaval for the person of having builders in twice, surveyors in twice. And I think we don't really necessarily stop and think about how disrupting it is for people, really. And they just want to get on with their lives. We want them to get on with their lives.
So it's really positive to kind of hear about that, the learning that you're doing in Wiltshire from those cases that you've got. But it's also nice, I guess, obviously myself and Manny Walker, who was the other OT that was involved with adaptations without delay alongside Arcot on Housing Lane. I think for us, it's always really positive when, because you work on a document like that, but to then hear it being used in the real world, as it were, in terms of supporting best practice, alongside you using that evidence base for Bath Out too. So it's just really, again, seeing that evidence you using that evidence in practice as well.
Well, I just feel we're in a really strong position now. I'm hoping Philip's on this call, but it's just such a fantastic piece of research that him and the team have done. And it gives us the evidence. I mean, I walked into a meeting with councillors and explained the rationale for change in light of this research. And they were like, well, it's a no-brainer. And without research, we don't have such a strong leg to stand on. I mean, before we had your lovely document, we had adaptations without delay, and we had made some changes to our service. But those two together really gave me strong armour to walk in and say, I want to really radically change how we do our whole service. And these are the positive impacts it will have for the people who use our services. And this is the potential impact on us as a service in terms of a budgetary requirement. And, and they just went, oh, okay then. And isn't it lovely to have that evidence? Because often we feel we don't have it. So thank you to Philip and the team. Thank you to anybody else who's on this call who's thinking about research. Get involved. We really need that evidence-based building. And that it just gave us the power. It gave me the power to say, let's try something differently and have everybody go, yeah, why not? It's a no-brainer.
So huge thank you for coming along this morning and spending your time. Hopefully we can get you along in perhaps 18 months' time to see how the pilot has gone and the outcomes that you've been able to achieve. But just as a kind of final question, obviously it is OT week, it is around prevention. So as a principal occupational therapist, what does adaptations and prevention mean to you?
Oh, that's a lovely question. I could spend a long time on that. Adaptations and prevention together for me are the opportunity to give people freedom within their own home to do the things that they want to do in the place that's most important to them. And if somebody's willing to have an adaptation, it can prevent them from needing so many services. It can mean that they are the expert in their own lives and the champion in their life. They're less dependent on people coming in, and they've got more freedom to choose and have that choice and control. So for me, it's really empowering working through adaptations in a preventative way. And yeah, I think it's what we want to be doing, and it just would be lovely if we can change these that way more time.
Mary, I couldn't have put it better myself. A huge thank you again for coming along today and sharing the work that you're doing in Wiltshire. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Foundations
Bye-bye.
Live.
Right, I think that's. I don't think there's any questions there. Not that Mary will be able to answer them. Yeah, so just a huge thank you for everybody. Well, for all of you attending today. Huge thank you to Jill, to sharing her work that she's doing around prevention and adaptations and housing it in Scotland. Huge thank you to Miriam and the team at York. Again, coming along this afternoon to talk a little bit about Bath Out 2, as well as introducing you to the new piece of research. And I'll bring Paul back in, because I'm sure Paul wants to go now, because it's 2:00 now in Australia. Yeah.
Yes, 2:15, so I'm ready for bed now. So I enjoyed that. Usually I know what's happening in Foundations Live. It's nice to kind of watch them as a viewer. So I think lots of really excellent conversation this afternoon. Good to see an FOI survey that somebody enjoyed getting. That was quite a novel one, wasn't it? But yeah, I think it shows kind of the benefit of adaptations that we all know, and that there's actually, if you can put it all together, there is quite a lot of stuff there that we can all share and can really push that message out. So I think from Wiltshire, it's kind of really interesting that they've made that case. Lots of really interesting stuff in Scotland. Kind of interested to read the kind of Hanover report and how they're making that kind of case, and that COH had picked it up. And yeah, good to see kind of Bath Out 2 continuing as well. The calculator that I can mention in the chat will be out once the report's published. So I think it'll be kind of part of the overall package. But that's quite a nice, simple calculator that put in how many Bath Outs you've done, and it gives you your return on investment for your kind of local DFG program. Okay. So. Thank you, Rach, for keeping me awake at this time.
No, my pleasure, Paul. My pleasure.
Thank you. Right, thank you all for joining us. If you're kind of wondering what we're doing in Australia, we're meeting quite a few people out there, and we've got a new IT or kind of CAD drawing package that allows you to very easily and quickly do drawings of things like bathrooms and ramps and other bits and pieces that will be launching at the OT show at the NEC at the end of the month. So please do come see us at the NEC. If you need more of an incentive, we've got the last box of DFG guidance that we found when we moved offices that we'll have with us as well. So yeah, please do come and see us at the OT show. We've also got DFG playing cards, which you can use to map out your local DFG process. So if that's not an incentive to come and see us, I don't know what it is. So in terms of other bits and pieces coming up, as well as being at the OT show, we've got a Foundations Live on the 18th of November. So that's my first day back in the UK on cold and damp homes, which after being in the warmth, being out here is quite appropriate. After that, on the 2nd of December, we'll be talking about designing better adaptations. And then we're going to do final Foundations Live of the year, which we haven't quite set the date for yet. We'll be introducing the new DFG quality mark and kind of part of the consultation exercise before we launch that at the DFG Champions Road shows in the spring. So as Rachel said, thank you to all our speakers this afternoon. Thank you all for joining us and for all your comments and messages. Really appreciate the Really appreciate all the comments and keep me awake to read them all at this time in the morning. And we will see you again, I say, on the 18th of November for a session on cold and damp homes. So until then, see you soon.